Okay? Now, Woodrow Wilson comes back from Paris. He's got the Treaty of Versailles. Not happy with it because it's too harsh, but it does include his idea for the League of Nations, an international organization where countries will join and talk out their differences before going to war. All right, so this is, in part 3, the story of President Wilson against Henry Cabot Lodge. Senator Henry Cabot Lodge of Massachusetts is a Republican. He is the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, a very important committee that has to approve the Treaty of Versailles, that includes the League of Nations, for it to go to the full Senate for a vote. And he's very influential with the Republicans. President Woodrow Wilson is a Democrat, and he wants it ratified, approved with a 2/3 vote. But the problem is Lodge hates Wilson, and Wilson hates Lodge. And it's personal and it's professional, and it's going to mess everything up. Now just listen. Wilson really angered Lodge by not taking him with him to the Paris Peace Conference. Wilson took all friendly Democrats with him, and Lodge was pretty steamed about that. Now, when Wilson comes back, Lodge doesn't like this Treaty of Versailles. In fact, he gives a big speech on the floor of the Senate where he has 14 reservations, 14 things he doesn't like about the Treaty of Versailles. 14, what a coincidence. He has 14 problems with the Treaty of Versailles. But he gives this big speech, and Lodge wants some changes made to preserve the power of the Congress to declare war and have more influence over foreign policy. He doesn't want to trust an untested world organization. Somewhat understandable. A couple of changes could have been made to the treaty to address that, and reasonable men should have done that. But neither Lodge nor Wilson were reasonable. They hated each other. Wilson was stubborn and wouldn't listen to reason, and Lodge was stubborn and wouldn't listen to reason. And they argued and they argued. And finally, Wilson decided, I'm going to take my argument in favor of the League of Nations to the people. And he hops on a train and he starts going about the country giving passionate speeches that reporters describe, tears coming down his face as he talks about the war to end all wars and the League of Nations, a place that will keep the peace forever. But Wilson was never especially a healthy guy or a robust guy. And in Pueblo, Colorado, he collapsed absolutely from nervous exhaustion, giving one of his speeches, and they took him back to Washington. And a few days later, he had a stroke that paralyzed his left side. He could barely speak. He was really in bad shape. And Lodge is actually happy at this turn of events. Wilson, meanwhile, is literally confined to his bedroom, going in and out of a coma. Now, what's going to happen is, in a remarkable period in our history, Wilson's wife and his personal physician are going to keep his condition secret from the public. Could never happen today, but these two people did it back then. And Mrs. Wilson, for about 6 weeks, made all the decisions for the president. Some congressman would come to the White House and say, can we see the president? We want to know how to vote on the farm bill. And Mrs. Wilson would say, oh, Woodrow has a bit of a cold. He's sleeping. What would you like to ask him how to vote on the farm bill? Okay, I'll go see what he wants you to do. She'd go to his bedroom and stand there for 10 minutes, make the decision herself, and go back and tell the Democratic congressman how to vote. Now, there will be 3 votes on the League of Nations. The first vote is on Wilson's pristine version of the Treaty of Versailles, the way he wants it. And Wilson will tell all the Democrats to vote with him. Lodge will tell all the Republicans to vote with him. And they do it. And there is not a 2/3 vote that is needed to approve, or you know the word ratify, a treaty in the Senate. That is classic checks and balances. The president makes treaties, and the Senate must approve them with a 2/3 vote. Well, they don't get 2/3 because the Republicans stick with Lodge and the Democrats stick with Wilson. Now they are going to have another vote, and the second vote they're going to have, because most Americans, frankly, and most politicians in the Congress wanted the United States to join the League of Nations. But the second vote is going to be on Lodge's version of the treaty. And Wilson, his judgment, I think, was really clouded by his stroke. I think it affected his thinking. Again, tells all the Democrats, vote against it, I want the treaty my way. And Lodge tells the Republicans, vote for it, I want the treaty my way. Well, on the second vote, they don't get 2/3 either. And it fails for a second time. And quite frankly, the public is outraged and they demand a third vote. And now it's obvious the only way the treaty is ever going to pass is if the Lodge reservations are included in the treaty. But Wilson is just angry, sticking to his guns, stubborn, his brain affected by his stroke. He urges the Democrats, vote down the Lodge Treaty. I want it my way. They have a third vote. The Democrats stick with Wilson, and the treaty does not get a 2/3 vote. And the bottom line is, the treaty was never approved by the Senate. The League of Nations comes into effect. The Europeans create it and join it and get it going. And the United States never joins the League of Nations. It was Woodrow Wilson's idea, and the United States never joined. And Wilson will finish out his term. There's another election in 1920. It's not a referendum on the League. You couldn't really tell where the Republican candidate stood, Warren G. Harding. He was waffling on the League. He said one thing in the morning, one thing in the afternoon. The Democratic candidate, James M. Cox of Ohio, governor, said he was for U.S. joining the League of Nations. Harding won the election in a landslide in 1920 because the voters were frankly fed up with Wilson and his preaching and his high-mindedness. And we get a Republican president in 1920, and the country and our elected officials really drift into apathy, and the League of Nations goes about its business, and the United States never joins the League of Nations. A few years later, Woodrow Wilson, having moved to a townhouse in Washington, D.C., and stuck in a wheelchair, will die a broken and defeated man. He goes from the heights of being the leader of the United States, which turned the tide of the war in favor of the Allies, and dreaming about his 14 points, and dreaming about the war to end all wars. But then he fails in Paris to get a peace without victory. The Treaty of Versailles is very, very harsh because that's the way the British and the French wanted it. And he fails to get the Treaty of Versailles, that at least included his League of Nations, ratified by the Senate. He goes from the heights to the depths. His health fails. And notably, the United States will never join the League of Nations. And Wilson will die a broken and defeated man.